Folks, what is going on? Welcome into Bullet Points. We're here to preview week 5 and talk about what's going on in the MAC as conference play fully opens up here. I'm your host, Ty B. We got Kevin Masseri joining me and Rob Ryan once again. Kevin, we got to get into it here first, talking about last week a little bit. I know you did a post game talking a lot about it, but the Bulls, a great first half last week, go out to a 35-7 to start but give up 27 straight points there in the second half. Only come out of that one with a 1 point victory against Old Dominion. Kev, this one's thrown a bit of a left hook to Bulls fans.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's probably one of the worst second halves I've ever seen, and that's under a lot of collapses underneath Lance Leipold and some special teams blunders. We saw 3 blocked kicks in the first quarter. We saw a benched punter. We saw just continued, very conservative nature on offense. So, look, I mean, they have to clean all that up. They played a really good first half. A lot of things bounced their ways with, block kicks, not only the block kick, but it bouncing perfectly for a touchdown. Fumble recovery, great play. However, still fairly lucky. They say that fumble recoveries are a 50-50 proposition, that there's skill in forcing the fumble, but no skill in recovering it. So that bounced their way in early on in the game. And some of those breaks just stopped going their way in the second half, and they were able to catch up. The defense, I mean, we were talking about injuries all game, which was weird. Like, it was literally every third play someone was out. So I think that probably had a play on the game a little bit down there in Norfolk, as well as just they weren't able to get off the field. Their DBs were getting torched, an issue we've seen under the past few years now. For an incredibly pretty strong front seven, the back four have struggled mightily so far this season, and even last year was probably their Achilles heel. So those are some of the common problems there. Special teams blunders, and just the inability to move. They were really just bleeding the clock, and it didn't work. They weren't able to get first down. So that's kind of what happened there in the second half. We talked about on the pregame show last week, Rob and I, we were advocates of being able to move the ball in the air. We saw it a little bit, and they just backed down from it. Marks hasn't been particularly good. Like to see a little bit more from him. You could have that debate. Is he even the best running back on this roster? That could be debated. So you needed to see the ball get moved in the air a little bit better. I thought they had some wins early on in the game in the air, and then they just totally went away from it.
Yep, absolutely. We've seen it time and time again from this UB team, and it's one of the reasons why they don't win big games, because when they're forced to do different things from, just running the ball down someone's throat, they can't figure it out. But when the opportunity is there, we've seen they can exploit it. We'll get into that a little bit because I think they're going to have that opportunity tomorrow. But Rob, you're more of the emotional fan side of things. Kev, a little bit more analytical, a little bit more critical on things for UB. But looking at that performance, you can't be very happy and very optimistic where this team is going into the MAC play.
Yeah, no, definitely. Before going into last week, I would have been okay with just a decent game. It didn't have to be spectacular. I mean, they were double-digit favorites, but I didn't need anything spectacular. I just needed a safe, clear win going to MAC play, and I would have felt good after a close loss to Coastal, a disappointing one to Nebraska, but an overall okay non-conference. After that second half, I'm not really sure what to think about this team. Hopefully they put that game behind it, and it was just a fluke that just the injuries, like Kev was saying, and just everything in total. And maybe they were looking ahead then instead of staying in the same game. So I'm just hoping that last week's game isn't a determination of what this team could do going to MAC play.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to be running, at all cylinders, especially going against a high horsepowered Broncos offense here, Kev. So let's get into it a little bit here, talking about Western Michigan. Obviously led by Caleb Ellerby there at their quarterback position. He's been lighting things up lately for them. Very efficient, doesn't turn the ball over. This year hasn't necessarily been asked to do too much outside of that pick game, where he did put up some big numbers. Besides that, been pretty average. But again, does not make the mistakes and seems to put his team in positions to get wins, and that's exactly what you need out of a quarterback in the MAC, Kev.
Yeah, I mean, he's a solid football player all the way around. He's a sophomore. It's a guy you're probably going to see in the MAC for a while. So get used to it. Like we went over like eligibility a couple shows ago, and it just confuses me to where some of these guys stand. But he is a sophomore technically. Had a crazy year last year, really picked up 1,700 yards and 18 touchdowns there last year in the COVID 2020, and just played remarkable down the stretch outside of some tiebreakers where was the reason they weren't able to make it into the MAC finals against UB. So this is a really good football team that traditionally is pretty good. And they like to run the ball. I mean, 174 carries, 666 yards on the ground, only averaging 3.8 yards per carry. UB's played pretty well against the run for the most part, except for running quarterbacks, which you won't see this week for the most part. So that's an advantage UB that they need to get after the running game. They'll run the ball a lot. They do have some efficiencies with Sean Tyler with 2 touchdowns and 282 yards, and Ladarius Jefferson's with 6 touchdowns as well. So they do have some talent at the running back position. It's not that incredibly of a efficient running team. And then you have a really strong passing game. I mean, it's the MAC, right? And they've been playing a lot of out of conference games. You have 2 guys with over 20 catches already on the roster, and Crooms and Moore. A couple of guys that, why it scares me, can UB cover these guys? That's going to be the thing that needs to be talked about, I think, on this show or anybody's show that watches UB or talks about UB, is that can they cover a guy that's gone, 124 yards and 95 yards in back-to-back weeks against Pitt and San Jose State University, and Sky Moore missing the first game. That's in 3 games. So they have some efficiencies on the wide receiver spot. Can it go up against potentially the weakness of this UB roster? That's going to be the matchup that they need to have. They cannot blitz their front 7 and put them in one-on-one coverage. It's not a press man. It's not going to work against a team like WMU. May work against others in the MAC. They need to be careful, and they need to give safety help.
Yep, absolutely, Kev. I agree with you right there on that one. The UB secondary, for whatever reason, they seem to play like 80% of the game. And then the 20% that they don't, they give up those huge plays, those gash plays, and that's what ends up killing them. And that's what's killed them in, the past probably 3 to 5 seasons. And the reason that they haven't won a MAC title, in my opinion, is that secondary. And you bring back most of those guys. So you have a pretty experienced secondary. You go out, you get a couple transfers, and you add to it as well. Some guys with a little bit of experience, and they still can't seem to put it together. I'm a bit apprehensive, about that secondary going into this matchup, Kev. And I think that's why you see odds makers putting the over-under on this game right at 59.5. They expect a ton of scoring here in this one. Rob, do you think that secondary is going to be able to hold up enough? Because we know what this front 7 can do. It's going to be tough sledding, running the ball. It's going to be tough even passing, because that pass rush is going to get after you. It's just whether or not that secondary can hold up, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've been really hoping the secondary would pull through eventually, because our head coach is a defensive backs coach. He was a defensive backs coach in the NFL, the highest level. I was really hoping that he would come in here and maybe teach them a thing or two, but it's so far after 4 games, we haven't really seen it. They've had, like you said, 80% of the game. They've been strong. They haven't let up too many big plays. And then, like you said, that 20% is where it goes off the hinges. But it's like you're saying, it relies on that front 7. Hopefully Taylor Riggins is back, because we didn't see him last week. They need to get after the QB, and I don't think they can win this game if they can't get to this QB.
Absolutely. That's going to be a key, though, for both of these teams, I think, is getting after the quarterback. Western Michigan, 8 sacks last week in a win over San Jose State. A huge, huge reason why they were able to keep San Jose State to under 150 yards last week is because they just kept getting after the quarterback. You add all those sacks up, takes away a ton of yards. And they're leading the MAC in sacks right now, tied for 5th in all of Division I football, I think, with 15 or 16 sacks overall. UB's 2nd in the MAC. With 13, so that they can get after the quarterback as well, especially with the name you mentioned, Taylor Riggins, a guy who's going to be someone to look out for come NFL draft time. He's been able to do it all, whether it's making the plays in the backfield, getting after the quarterback, or strafing off and making some plays in the run game as well. So you definitely need him out here in a game like this. It's going to be a huge moment for them. And, flipping it conversely to the offensive side, that offensive line needs to continue to hold up. Only given up 1 sack between 2020 and 2021 so far. Still one of just 2 teams to not allow a sack in 2021. That's where you have to, continue to win. You got to win in these trench battles. And in the second half, they weren't necessarily winning those battles, trying to push around that Old Dominion defense to get that rushing game going in the second half when they're trying to kill the clock. So I think they got to come out with a real hot start, Kev.
Yeah, and I mean, you got to start, just kind of wrap up WMU by talking about the defense. I mean, they do get after the quarterback. We can't just sit here and say only UB can do that. WMU can do that as well. They have a couple of guys in double digits, or excuse me, in over 2 sacks. So you have Corvin Moment, a really strong linebacker with 2 sacks and 22 tackles, a guy you got to watch no matter where he plays, puts his hand on the ground. He plays stand-up linebacker, pretty good player. And Rolf Holly, a defensive lineman with 3.5 sacks, can cause some havoc against your offensive line. And Ali Farad, a guy that has 4 sacks already, 30 yards lost. I mean, he can be a play wrecker, a game wrecker. So they can get after it. Can that UB offensive line hold up against probably their toughest matchup of the season? I would say on that side of the ball in the trenches, or at least from the defensive side. So that, I mean, it starts there. And so what does that mean, guys? I think, unfortunately, they're going to try to run the ball again. I need to see more creativity out of the offensive coordinator. I can't just see a couple of zone read stretch runs. I can't see a couple of power. It's not working. They need to be a little bit more creative. If they're not going to throw to open up the pass, maybe some drive starters, some quick throws, they're in trouble. They need to be more creative. That, for instance, they knew they were going to run the ball last week down in Norfolk, and it was very, very, they're not quite to the talent level of last year or 2 years ago where they can do it and then still continue to do it successfully. The defense knew they were doing it and they stopped it. So they need to be a little bit more creative with their run schemes, because that's, quite frankly, I think they're going to be a little bit scared of maybe one of the better pass rushing teams in the league, and in entire college D1 in general. So yes, it's a little bit heightened, but you can't take those sacks away no matter who they're against. Unfortunately, they need to protect the passer. The best way to do that with their strong offensive line might be to run the ball. I don't love it. I still want to see them throw the ball a little bit more. I think they have some winnable matchups. I think DBs in the MAC aren't the most talented players. And that goes for UB or across the entire division. Because, quite frankly, if you're a good DB and you want to play DB, the MAC might not be the place you go. A lot of converted receivers, a lot of other things that might be happening in that position. So I think that it's, by and large, of any position group, look, you can have a good offensive line. You can rush the passer. We've seen some NFL players there. We've seen some first overall picks on the offensive line. You've seen some skill players work out, Kareem Hunt, etc. It's really even quarterback at times, but it's really at the defensive back position, and that might lead to where UB struggles. If a solid defensive back is already a DB as a freshman, they might not be picking to play in the MAC. That's why throwing teams win in this league. And that's why I need to see the Bulls throw the ball a little bit more efficiently. If they come out and just say, we're scared of your pass rush, we're going to run it, you better be creative. And they haven't shown that through 4 weeks.
Yep, absolutely. And I think there's going to be a great opportunity for UB to throw the ball. Cornerback Deshaun Bustle out for the season for Western Michigan after suffering an injury in week 2. And their 2 all-conference defensive backs, Bryson Garner and A.J. Thomas, are both questionable. So that's going to be something to watch out for going into this game. It could give KVT a good opportunity. We saw last year when Miami of Ohio, they tried to really sell out against the run and load the box, try and go a lot, single man coverage. And what did KVT do? Shredded them up 17-27, 340 yards, 4 touchdowns through the air. Very efficient day. Rob, could we see that type of performance from KVT again?
I'm hoping so. Me and Kevin been, like Kevin said earlier, we've been reiterating that they need to get this passing game going, and I think this is the perfect game to do so. Like you said, their starting cornerback is hurt. The other 2 is they're both questionable. So you're going to be facing the 4, 5, 6 stringers on their team, which isn't usually if you're a 4th, 5, 6 stringer in the MAC, you're not really I don't know the word, but you're not a talented player to be in this not greats of the league and being that low in the depth chart. So I really think we saw Keon Williams last week really have a nice game. We've seen a few games from him. Dom Johnson had a nice game 2 weeks ago against Coastal. Maybe we don't know what's going on with Giovanni Ruiz, if he's still hurt, we have no idea what's going on with him, but we definitely need to see the passing game going. I know me and Kevin have been saying it. I really think they have to try out Matt Mars eventually. KVT, like you said, in the last year Miami game, he could throw the ball, but last year he had targets of Antonio Nunn, Trevor Wilson. Both of those are gone. We have an inexperienced wide receiver core that I think we need the explosive QB to pass the ball. So I really think that they're going to stay with the run, but I'm going to keep reiterating that they need to go to the passing game if they're going to want to win in this league.
Yeah, it's funny that we say that because Keon Williams is actually the leading receiver in the MAC right now. After that performance from last week, I think he had 145 receiving yards. Feed the man. He looks like an absolute weapon.
And they stopped throwing to him. I don't
Yeah.
know why, what the problem was there. He was feasting. Coach Mo said they had a winnable matchup there. I don't know what the issue was, whether they were up 14-21, whatever, at whatever point we're talking about, why they decided to run the ball when they had a winnable matchup. Yes, you wanted to kill some clock, but as you started to struggle and as they started to come back, you needed to throw the ball to potentially probably your biggest win right now, and that's Keon Williams, 24 catches, 346 yards, and a touchdown. I just need to see more out of the throwing game in general. 62% in the MAC, not ideal. 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, and 124 quarterback rating. Those are pretty low in college football, especially when you did have some winnable games there for yourself. So I need to see a little bit more. If he's not going to do more and the running game's not going to efficiently work, a move might need to be made at that position at some point. I don't know when that might be, but if they start to struggle in MAC play, it's possible, especially on the offensive side of the ball, more importantly, I think it's possible that you need to see a little bit more ability to throw the football. Mm-hmm. I mean, especially without a guy like Jarrett Patterson. And you see, we can have a debate about it, but where does Kevin Marks rank as a street? I just dogged Western for having a terrible yards per carry. Kevin Marks is right there with the Western running backs. How can I dog the Western running backs and not mention Marks's inefficient 67 carries at 3.8 yards per carry? But then you have guys like, I know Ron Cook Jr.'s is by a fumble recovery. His is a little bit heightened, but you have 5.3 yards per clip, almost 1.5 yards more per carry from Dylan McDuffie on 224 yards and 4 touchdowns. I mean, at some point that matters. Maybe not in a 2-week sample size, maybe not in a 4-week sample size, 6 and 8 week sample size, though. You're starting to talk about maybe some of those carries need to be moved down the depth chart. Or be brought into a level position, but you just haven't seen the efficiency from Marks like I thought I would see. And maybe UB's in an okay shape going forward with McDuffie and Cook, and then they'll have another year of that as well. So I think that they need to maybe do a little bit better there, and that Marks fumble absolutely killed them. And even Coach Mo mentioned that fumble, didn't put out the player name, but we know what fumble he's talking about at midfield there. Could have probably been enough to end the game. So those kind of mistakes, and we saw Marks's fumbles too as the backup to Jarrett Patterson last year, and throughout his career, occasionally he will put it on the ground. Wouldn't call it an issue, but it is a thing. So I think I need to see more efficiencies if you're going to give that many carries to a guy getting 3.8 yards per clip. That's not good in the NFL. That's certainly not good in MAC.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. I think they should be feeding McDuffie. He just runs with so much power, and especially early on in games, get him just going and get him going, because that's exactly when you bring in a guy like Marks, who's going to, he can run a guy over, but he's a one-cut guy and he's gone. Like, that's the type of running back you want Marks to be. You don't want him to have to be the guy necessarily, taking 25 carries, trying to establish, between the tackles. But I think McDuffie is that perfect guy to do that. And you mix it up. And going back to that quarterback issue, I think when you look at the grand scheme of things for UB, if you struggle in MAC play and you got to start looking towards the future. KVT's not the future. He's a senior. He's going to be gone. Yeah, you have to look at some of these younger quarterbacks on your roster and see what you have for the future, whether it's Casey Case or Trevor Baczynski or, someone else, who knows. But I think at some point, if things slip away, you will see them. But let's hope we don't get to that point. KVT has to have a good showing here, and everything is set up for him to do it. He's just got to go out there and do it, right, Kev?
Got an offensive line that doesn't allow sacks. I mean, if there's a winnable, sometimes these quarterbacks lose maybe as a senior or maybe as a freshman because they don't have offensive lines and or running games. He potentially has both. I know I kind of dogged the yards per carry of Western and of Marks, but they can run the ball. They're built to run the ball still. They've had some bad defensive games against bad matchups, I should say, that have stuffed the run because they're a little predictable throwing the ball. But is that KVT's fault they're predictable running the ball? Chicken and the egg type of discussion there. I don't know. But you have a good offensive line still that has historically been lately, since Tyree Jackson, been pretty good. They need to make sure that he's moving the ball. At some point, you got to make a move. Coach Mo shouldn't be that tied to him as a senior, like you just said. Wasn't even his recruit. At some point, I'd like to see yes, I would take an interception or two, but if I see an arm-talented quarterback and I see the ability to move the ball in the air, I think this is just a testament to them not thinking they have weapons. I don't know I don't know how much of it's KVT's fault and how much of it is like Dom Johnson's your number 2 receiver right now. Giovanni Ruiz, we don't even know as people who watch and cover UB if he's playing week to week. Week 1, I didn't think he was playing, was from what I was told. He's out there catching the first pass of the game. And then I don't know. I don't know what's going on with him ever. He's such a talented player, never on the field though. So at some point, you don't have weapons. I mean, I saw a couple players that I didn't know would play this year playing at some points last week, and then they didn't get back in the games. So, when are they going to be willing to play some of those younger players and some of those younger receivers on the team? Like Cuff, I think I saw I think Javion Cuff, was he in? And I was just excited to see potentially players that I wasn't going to see this season. So yeah. I need to see more out of this throwing game, Ty and Rob. And to anyone's point, it's not the offensive line's fault like it could be for any team, pro team, whatever. It's not in this case. I can't blame the running game in terms of it being their fault. I think it's a quarterback issue. And if you're serious about winning now and in the future, I need to see something out of him in the next week or two in MAC play, or I'm going to have to talk on this show about making a move.
Absolutely, because you got, a ton of talent that's there, at least like from what we see and what we hear. Like you look at a guy like Cameron Laybourne, he looks incredible when he has the ball in open space. Try to find him the ball in open space a little bit more, but this offense doesn't do things to get the ball in dynamic guys' hands. They just, hand it off and, here, just go forward, basically. That's been essentially, their motto, their game plan for the past few seasons. And you gotta diversify things. You gotta use some, pre-snap motions and get some guys moving around on the offense and get the ball into open space in your playmakers' hands. It doesn't matter who it is, just do it. Get, Ron Cook on a swing pass. Do some different things that, open things up for the offense. Get some easy completions for KVT that'll allow him to build that confidence throughout the game. And yeah, I think that's where it comes down to, and that's where this game's going to be won or lost. And it might not be because of the players. It might be because of the play calling on offense.
Is it? That's a question I'll bring up. I've kind of flirted with this. Is it the quarterback or is it the offensive coordinator? I'm trying to make up in my own mind. Is it the offensive coordinator's like, I'm used to maybe having a little bit more talented of a player, so this is what we're going to do? Or is it the quarterback saying, look, you're not calling the right things. Like, what's going on here? They have a lot of talented running backs. I'd like to see more screen passes. Even Mike Washington and Ahmed, a couple of guys we saw in the Wagner game that look like they're talented. Get them on the field if you don't have receivers. Do something creative. Be a little bit more just aggressive than maybe your traditional sets where all you're going to do is run marks.
Yeah, do something. There's so many innovative plays now, especially in collegiate football, that you can try some things out here to get the ball in your playmakers' hands that isn't just a handoff. And will they do it? I mean, I don't know. And we can, blame the offensive coordinator all we want, but coming in after spring practices and trying to completely change the offense, that's very tough. So I think this is where we're seeing a lot of holdover philosophy from last season, and maybe, hopefully over the next few years we see them start to expand things and go to a more modern style offense. But that'll pretty much wrap it up for us here on this Western Michigan UB preview on that. We'll make our predictions at the very end, but we want to talk a little bit here about the MAC and take a look about what's going on as MACtion begins. There has been actually one game in the MAC so far, and Toledo was able to get the win over Ball State, so that means they're in first place in all of the MAC right now. They have looked pretty good this year with a win over Notre Dame, but they also had a bit of a stinker there against Colorado State where they only put up 6 points at home. We've seen pretty much all the teams across the MAC have, even the teams that get impressive wins, have some games where they just look very inconsistent.
And that's the division, guys. I mean, that's just what it is. Sometimes it's about runs. I kind of like it to like baseball. And in terms of like, it's all about the runs and in stretches, like what team's hot at the right times. Yes, it's interesting to be hot out of conference, but it's better to be hot during MAC play because let's be honest, it was cool to be ranked, and even being ranked in the bottom 20s or almost ranked is cool. But the goal here is to win your division, play in the MAC championship, and win that game where UB's almost checked the boxes in recent years, almost win their division, win the MAC games all around, be okay in out of conference, and then just win bowl games, check, but then just completely fail in the biggest moments against a team that got hot. Ball State's not that good. They got hot. They're not that good right now. They've already lost a MAC game. And we've already talked about on the show about some turnover. They got hot. That's what happens in this conference. And I think UB has the talent. I just need to see some more offensive consistency. But there's a lot to like in this conference right now. You mentioned Toledo, a team that you got to call out that I thought was probably the worst team. One of the worst teams beside Akron was Bowling Green winning in Minnesota. Yeah, it's not a great team. It's a huge win to win in Minnesota. There's a ton of fans there. They basically held them to nothing pretty much the entire game. They scored a cheapy third quarter touchdown, but outside of that, held them to 10 points. That's a win from a team that didn't do anything and just played solid football all the way around. And UB was unable to do that, maybe against a little bit better Nebraska team, but going in the season, they were probably even in terms of where they're thought about. So, that's a huge win.
Rush with the injury bug, and that's the one difference. But
probably, and it makes sense that would be the difference. I mean,
I think they're starting
now a team you might have to think about. I wasn't thinking about them, 2 weeks ago. Now I got to think about them a little bit. Like, they have that good signature win. Will that mean anything? Maybe not. But I mean, I think that they're good enough. And then a Kent State team who I think's personally set up to have the best run. They kind of have a UB basketball out of conference schedule this year where Texas A&M, Iowa, Maryland, they're willing to take the L to be better. And so teams going into MAC play, they're 1-3, they're nothing special, but they're probably set up for the most success. And they have a big game against Bowling Green this week, and then play UB the following week. We'll know real quickly if this is Kent's division or if they're frauds. So I'm really watching that Kent State Bowling Green game because Bowling Green isn't supposed to be good at all. But if they win, we got to take Bowling Green seriously. We have to take Bowling Green seriously. If they don't, equally so. Kent State's still probably my favorite to win. And week 2 in the MAC play could be, it might not be, if you lose that, you might not be able to get it back.
Absolutely, Kev. I'm right there with you. Dustin Crum was incredible last year. Mixed bag this year. Their only win again over an FCS team. You brought up the tough schedule, but I think they have a great opportunity. But it's going to be tough here in the MAC East, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened 2 years ago with us. It's that we started out that MAC play with those 2 losses to Ohio and the loss to Miami, and we tried to fight our way back, and it never happened. So it's definitely that week. Next week's matchup against Kent State is probably our biggest game of the year. Like Kev was saying, the MAC West is definitely the more talented conference division with more of the teams that are likely to compete. In the MAC East, there's Kent State, who's probably the team to beat right now, even though, like Kev was saying, they had that very talented non-conference schedule. We'll really see in the next few weeks if they are actually good or if it was just, like he said, flukes. Bowling Green, I'm still not on that train. I think it was just they just went in there, and you know what happens in college sports, that some teams can just get a win out of nowhere and it'd be a shocker. Miami, I know Kev is saying no, they should be better with Gabbard, but I'm not high on them. Akron, I mean, they're just a mess. And then Ohio is the most shocking one. I mean, our guy Bunt is obviously very high on Ohio. He said Rock was supposed to be better than his brother, which we haven't seen. They're a mess. So I really think it's coming down to a 2-team division, 2-team competition in the MAC East, and that I think really next week's game against Kent State could determine who's going to Detroit this year.
And you might have to put Bowling Green third because just out of comparison, because just a week prior, Miami went in there and lost to a Minnesota team. So just at the very least, with direct competition of maybe factoring in a little bit of those injuries, Bowling Green might be out of nowhere the third best team in the in the East. So real early on in the schedule, we learn real quickly, is Bowling Green a true 2 or 3 in the conference, or are they complete frauds? But I do think that it might be, I mean, I didn't predict this, but it might be a Kent UB Bowling Green type of battle where, I'm not scared of Miami anymore, even though I do think that they play an efficient style of football, and Ohio is just completely off the board there in Akron. There's just nothing to say. They're just terrible. They're one of the worst teams in football. So Could Bowling Green have catapulted themselves up into like, all right, we need to make sure we take care of them? I think so, because and then equally so, you got to look at Ohio and just be like, okay, that shouldn't be a threat. So I think they just kind of traded, but we'll see how much of a threat they are. I think it's a pretty important week one here, where you're getting one of the better teams in the East in UB, one of the better teams in the West in WMU. You're getting a rising team in Bowling Green, and you're getting a potentially top MAC East team in Kent. So there's some big games here early on, and then you already kind of saw Toledo and Northern already happen. So, I mean, you're pacing the conference already, Toledo, WMU. Then you're looking on the East, like this Bowling Green Kent game could be 1-3 or 2-3 playing right here. So, we have to see how this winds up, but, you're definitely having 2 versus 2 right now in the conferences with UB and WMU. So these are important games. This isn't just UB Akron. Wouldn't have as much to say about that. These are pretty important games early on that, like, hey, WMU then goes and plays Bowling Green pretty quickly too. So you have some really important games here, and Kent as well with WMU. So you have some really testing games that you get a really good sense of who's going to be good real quickly. So you got to be on your game. You don't have time to rebound and not throw the ball, because you can't lose to WMU and Kent. You're out.
Oh, no. It's just not going to happen. And there's going to be just a ton of great football to watch out for this weekend, like you mentioned. We got some of these other games. You got Eastern Michigan taking on Northern, Central Michigan taking on Miami, Ohio, Akron, PU, and then Ball State and Toledo are going to finish out their non-conference schedules. Toledo has UMass and Ball State has Army. So it'll be a good week to kind of figure out where teams stand within the MAC. I know every year there's a bunch of topsy-turviness where the bottom team, beats a top team early on, and then a team gets on a run. So, we'll be monitoring all that for you. So make sure you guys stay tuned to Bullet Points throughout the season. We're going to have a ton, not only here live for you guys, but over on trainwrecksports.com. Rob, it's time, though, for our predictions for this game. What do you see happening in this one?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a bounce back game for the Bulls. In the beginning of the season, I said this was going to be a game that they were going to lose, but I've changed my mind after last week's horrible second half. I just can't see this team playing bad again 2 weeks in a row. I think it's going to be a bounce back game. Probably the rushing game is probably going to take charge. I'm really hoping the pass game is going to come through. But I'm going to go with a very close battle, and I'm going to go UB 31, Western Michigan 28.
Yeah, I mean,
Be surprised if
I'm on the other side of the fence with this one. I just don't think they can come off of that kind of half and bring it up to speed against a good offensive WMU team who might have a strength at UB's weakness. It's going to be tough. I mean, I have WMU 28-21. I think they're going to struggle out of the gate in MAC play, guys. I think they're going to lose back-to-back games and then really pick it up and try to make that push at the end of the season where their schedule gets a little softer. They might be coming together. Maybe they make a move or two. They've already made a good move at punter. So I think that things like that will start to happen, and then they'll start to find their footing. And maybe that's enough to get you in. Maybe it isn't, but I have them starting off the season losing 2, but then consistently getting better. And then, schedule weakening a little bit as the season goes on. Like, that bowling, UB plays, WMU, Kent, Ohio, and then it goes to Ohio, Akron, Bowling Green, Miami, NIU, who's not very good anymore, and Ball State may or may not be good. Conceivably, they could win all those, but I do have them starting 0-2, and I do have a 20-21 loss at WMU against WMU.
Yeah, I'm not as sold on Western Michigan's offense as a lot of these people are, and the prognosticators, especially the bookmakers who have Western Michigan as 7-point favorites coming into UB. Bit of a surprise. Thought that would be a little bit closer on that one, especially with UB being at home in this one, where they're 10-1 in their last 11 home MAC games. They've played pretty good at home within the conference, and I think we're going to see more of that. It's going to be their style of game, I think, early on. I don't think they're going to let Western Michigan break it open. It's going to be the key is going to be to not give up those big plays. If they can do that in their secondary, the plays should be there for them offensively to put up enough points here. If you get to 30 first, I think you get the win. I think I said 31-20 in my prediction, 31-20, 31-27, somewhere in that range, maybe 24. I think UB is able to get it done. It might end up being a one-score game there, but I think they have just enough to get over this week. And that's more because I'm just, like I said, I'm just not fully there on Western Michigan. I think they can be a threat throughout the season, but that defense together, I don't think really any elite type offenses. They haven't ran into a coastal type of offense. Even Nebraska's offense, because of what they do with their spread and everything else, they're pretty good in terms of putting up a bunch of yards and whatnot. So, yeah, I'm just gonna have to go with UB on this one and hope I'm right. Hopefully, it's not the second half team from ODU that continues here, and we get and whatnot. But that'll wrap it up here for us on bullet points for our Rob. Any thoughts before we here?
I'm just hoping they play a full 60-minute game unlike last week, and I think if they do that, they'll come out with the victory.
But I think it comes down to what you just said. Does that big play happen or not? And that I'm predicting it does. You might be predicting they do enough. So that's really where it happens. If you see a big play or two from the DB spot of UB, negative big play, I don't think they have enough to overcome it. You'll know right then and there if they can get it done. If they don't come early and often or not in back breaking spots, you're right. That score prediction could flip for me. I just do predict that we do see them take advantage of the DB spot of the Bulls. So if they don't, UB's in a great spot. The last time they lost, wasn't it the Kent collapse? Wasn't that the game they lost?
Yeah.
Where they were up like 18, 20, like with 10 minutes left, something like that. Some variation of that. And then just have like let up 3 touchdowns in like 3 minutes, something I've never seen before. Rivaled last week here for UB in those 2 games. So difference was they won on a missed extra point. So that's the big one, Ty. That's the big one, Rob. Will the DBs do enough to make sure those big plays don't happen? And if you'll hear from me, if in the fourth quarter I'm feeling good and those don't happen, it could lead to really good things for UB. That's the thing to watch out for. If they're feasting on them, I just don't see how they can do enough defensively from the throwing game to get it done.
Exactly. That Nebraska game was winnable. 2 big plays, crushed them. Both missed tackles, and then the secondary, again, missed tackles, missed coverage. That's gonna crush you every time. You gotta minimize those mistakes, and let's hope they do it tomorrow. Be a big game for the Bulls at noon at UB Stadium. So make sure you guys get your tickets, get over there. It's gonna be homecoming, so I'm sure they'll have a bunch of stuff going on before the game. So you guys don't want to miss out for that one. We'll be over in the special event slot, tailgating. No Degenerate Al will be there, myself. I think UB clothed guy will be there. So it should be a lot of fun. So make sure you guys get out over there.
And release an Ohio time, Mac, please. I need you to release a time for that Ohio game. It's 2 weeks out now, like tomorrow, right? 2 weeks from tomorrow.
It would be probably Monday. They'll announce it.
All right. Yes. So that's what I'm looking forward to, is getting out after that. Now, not a huge, I shouldn't say it's a huge game, but now not a very good opponent in Ohio. But hey, looking forward to making some content there at the stadium.
Absolutely. So make sure you guys stay tuned at Bullet Point 716 over on Twitter for more. We got a ton of content coming out there, trainwrecksports.com. We only got 3 words left for you. Let's go Bulls.